Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live, talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynn@pghcitypaper.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Hey, and a good morning to you. It's weird how it was spring yesterday, and now we're back into winter. And I know those of you who are serious Steeler fans are pretty down in the dumps. I must admit, I had the game on with the sound off, and I couldn't believe what I saw at the very end. What, the other team got 3 attempts at a field goal? Is that what happened? Yeah. 3 attempts given to us, given to them by us. Wow, that's a miserable loss. Just one more football-related thing, just because it's Monday and I'm just getting back into the swing of things here a little slowly. I have a personal story that I was reminded of because of something that happened in the football world yesterday. I also saw that my other team, the Green Bay Packers, lost again. They are having the worst year in God knows how long. And that Pittsburgh's own Mike McCarthy, their head coach, was summarily fired. And I was not necessarily surprised by it because I'd been seeing mutterings about it for some time. But I know that there's a lot of blowback from people who thought it was a real classless thing to do to a coach who had brought the team back to so many, well, I don't even know. 2 Super Bowl appearances? 1 win? I don't have a clue. Anyway, and that to have that kind of record and to be sort of kicked out with just a few games left on the schedule is not particularly nice. But then again, football's not a nice sport. And I noted that the guy who fired him also named Mike. The coach is Mike McCarthy. The guy who's the general manager is Mike Murphy. Easy to get those 2 Irishmen mixed up, right? Mike Murphy, who now is, taking a lot of crap from people for kicking McCarthy out. And I was thinking that people are complicated. It's something I'm always telling younger people who are, so certain about things like, this is the worst person in the world. Well, probably not. Or this person has no redeeming qualities. Well, probably not. I can think of only one person at the moment that doesn't have any. I mean, really, people, are complicated. So I'm thinking that as this Mike Murphy, who I've never met, is villainized on Twitter and other forums today, I have only one story about this man. And although I believe I met him once at an event. But this is a story about my mother. And it says something about the kind of man that this Mike Murphy is. It has nothing to do with football. I have often noted that there's a small college right outside of Green Bay, just 3 miles from our house, called St. Norbert College. And my family has been very much affiliated with it. My parents endowed a peace and justice center there, which brings in all kinds of speakers and has for over 20, 25 years. That's how I got to meet Elie Wiesel. There was always a dinner before, and so I got to meet these amazing people that were brought in, famous historians, Arthur Schlesinger, blah, blah, blah. And after my father's death, my mother stepped up, and to this day, still is the family representative at all of these events. And my mom herself has received a number of accolades from the Peace and Justice Center. So there was a Chinese dissident brought in to give a speech, and there was a dinner beforehand at a nearby hotel, and the Chinese man was taken by my mother, who, and that is often the case. She's a beautiful woman, despite her age, and he was blown away when after dinner she began walking out, and he said, how are you getting to the college? And she said, I'm driving. And he said, you're driving alone? And I can imagine the look she gave him. He must have received a rather withering look. And she said, well, of course. And she went to her car and drove to the college. While walking from her car to the venue, it was winter. She slid on some black ice and went down, face planting down. She had to be, at the time, maybe about 90, 91. And she's lying there, face down, and thinking, oh my God, I think I did something in my mouth. And someone immediately came up to her and helped her up. My mother said he was this nice-looking man. And he asked if she was okay, and she said, yes, I'm fine. He's looking at her. He said, I don't think so. And she said, I'm fine. Meanwhile, there was like a tooth sort of like hanging by a thread coming out of her mouth. And she says, I have an event I have to go to. He said, no. He said, I have to take you either to your home or to a dentist. I need to take you somewhere. And she put up a fight, as I imagine she would have, but he eventually got her into his car, and she directed him back to our house. He brought her into the house, still concerned, said, you've got to see a dentist. Please, do you have someone you can call? And this man stayed with her, a perfect stranger, till she called her dentist. And this being Green Bay, it was like, who knows what, 8:30 at night. She calls the guy. He says, I'll meet you at my office. Just come right over. And so my mom got off the phone and turned to the guy, who by this time she has identified. She thought he looked familiar, and she said, oh, you're the head of the Packers. And she said he winced, like he did not in any way want to be that at the moment. He just wanted to be a guy who was taking care of this old lady he found face down on the sidewalk. And the two of them argued for, argued from the sidewalk to his car, to the house, to the phone, to get the dentist. Then she said, I'll drive myself to the dentist. And he said, no, you won't. I'm taking you to your dentist. And, well, so that was Mike Murphy. And what made me think of it is that I happened to read some tweets that were just, saying how awful a guy he is to have done this. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, he's not an awful guy. I know. He's the kind of guy who was on his way to someplace else and completely stopped his own life to take care of a perfect stranger and to do more than some would have done. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't have stopped. He not only stopped, he takes her to his, he took command, took her to his car, took her home, insisted that she see somebody, got her to the doctor. And I just want to say, my big thing now is people are complex. Most of us, neither good nor bad. There was a crossword puzzle clue in the Sunday New York Times puzzle that said something like, the Bible says all men are. And of course, the answer was sinners. And I thought, yeah, we sure as hell are. We all have our demons. We all have our really bad moments, bad judgments. We all have shame, or should, I suppose. We have bad thoughts. And yet we are all capable of good. And so I think what happens here a lot, and because of the current ugly division of our country and our social fabric, we are, all of us, inclined to deny other people their humanity. And I guess that's all of that's weighing on me, I guess, because of this huge contrast that we're seeing now with the life and presidency of George H.W. Bush and the man who currently holds that office. I never voted for George H.W. Bush. I said all kinds of horrible things about him. I probably made him out to be a bad man more than once. And now we see, we're reminded that he was a human being, that he was loved and loved, that the most important thing to him, and this was really often very clear, was his family. And how his family so loved him. And that, says a lot about a human being. It does. And that he was an honorable man and a humble holder of that office. I attended that very rainy city-sponsored, I don't know what to call it, tribute to the 11 Jews who were massacred at Tree of Life, the one that Michael Keaton and Tom Hanks surprisingly showed up at. And there were very few people here, but the rabbi who survived and who was front and center throughout so much of those horror-filled weeks, he got up. I think it was him. And if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. But he said something about hate and how we've got to excise it from our vocabularies. We use that word too readily. He said, we say, I hate, the Browns. He said, you don't hate the Browns. You might dislike them and want them to lose. He said, our speech is constantly, I hate that. I hate this. I hate her. I hate him. And he said, I pledge never, ever again. He considers that like the worst 4-letter word. He doesn't want to use it ever again. Hate. And he said, I want you all to pledge to try to do the same. And I remember we were all raising our hands, and I was pledging not to say I hate. And I was thinking, I wonder if I'll even make it through the rest of the day without doing that. But it's been in my head how easily we throw that word around. And I don't know. I've been really thinking that we've got to try to force ourselves to have a more nuanced view, or we're all going to be hateful. Oh, I don't know. So, now I suppose I'll jump into my stuff about all these people who I have said I hate. Well, before I do that, let me do an obit, because this is a guy who I never heard of. He never really sort of presented himself on in a public way until he was 87 years old. He lived a full life. He'd had children. He served in World War II. But it was when he was 87 that he wrote a memoir. Seems like a good time to write one. I'm 87. I've lived a life. Let me see if I can impart any wisdom as a result. And his first book was called 1923. You might have seen this obituary because I think the Post-Gazette reprinted it. And 1923 was the year of his birth. he had a very difficult childhood. His parents were poor as church mice. And his dad had been a coal miner, and then he was injured, and the family was just destitute, scrounging for food, often leaving there wherever they were living in the middle of the night because the rent collector was on the way. This guy, Harry, that's his name, went to work at the age of 7 and still tried to go to school, but he ended up quitting school at 14. And that rough childhood informed his heart when he saw others suffering. So he writes this memoir at 87, and it was published 8 years ago. And then he writes 4 more books. And he was hard at work on his 6th when he died last week at the age of 95. He ended up landing a column in The Guardian. He became, in his old age, a social justice warrior. A few weeks, I think, before his death, he was at a refugee camp somewhere. Is sort of a remarkable human being. Harry Leslie Smith. He liked to call himself the world's oldest rebel. So he saw the images of refugees around the world fleeing their homelands, and the same pictures we saw. But they kicked up memories of what he had seen in World War II as a soldier. And so he started to act. It didn't matter that he was well into his 90s. He spent his last years touring refugee camps in Europe. He took to Twitter, had more than 250,000 followers. He hosted a weekly podcast. And he often said to people, enjoy yourself. It's later than you think. But for me, it's what he said about old age and the meaning of life that are the most compelling. This guy who didn't start coming out into the world till he was 87 years old said this: for me, old age has been a renaissance. Despite the tragedies of losing my beloved wife and my son, it is why the greatest error anyone can make is to assume that because an elderly person is in a wheelchair or speaks with quiet deliberation, that they have nothing important to contribute to society. It's equally important not to say to yourself, if you are in the bloom of youth, I'd rather be dead than be like that, as you look at an old person. And he says this is the sentence that just blows me away and comes back to what I was talking about hate before. As long as there is sentience, as long as you got your head and an ability to love and show love, there is purpose to existence. Harry Leslie Smith, who did not love Donald Trump, by the way. We have a caller if he's still there. They hung up. Well, it's okay. Sorry. You know, sometimes I'm sorry. I know you call because you want to respond to something I've said, and then I move on to something else, and I'm inclined to want to finish that. So forgive me for that. Hard sometimes to get us working together. I thought the most extraordinary, this mind-blowing picture that I saw over the weekend was that picture of Vladimir Putin and the Saudi prince high-fiving each other and then greeting each other and with smiles on their faces. And I just thought it was a picture of like just evil. These are two men who bestride the world stage. And by the way, two men that our president kowtows to. Two men who have no problem whatsoever murdering people, ordering, oh, God forbid their hands should be dirty, ordering others to kill people, often journalists. Journalists. Why? Because journalists are truth tellers, as opposed to what their pal Donald Trump is trying to teach America, that journalists are somehow lying to them. Those two, that unabashed display, just made my blood run cold. And if you watch the video of it, you could see behind them walking into the room our, God help us, president. Who had clearly been told, give them a wide berth. No such photos with you like the one that we saw of Trump looking like a giddy teenager seeing some idol of his approaching when he saw Putin coming toward him recently in Europe, even as Angela Merkel and Macron looked at Putin with this thinly veiled revulsion. Trump was like, it's Vladimir. It's the guy who's got something on me. I gotta look really, really happy. And also seeing that Saudi prince. That came after the news that we now know that the CIA based its conclusion that the prince had, in fact, ordered the assassination of Khashoggi. They based it on the fact that they had intercepted, boy oh boy, at least 11 messages that the prince had sent to the team that oversaw the killing. 11 messages. Even in the hours right before and right after Khashoggi's death. The CIA has the electronic intercepts. And that means that that was in whatever classified information was given to the White House about the culpability of the prince. And still, the President of the United States refused to believe his own intelligence services when they came with incontrovertible proof. It brings us to this question that Charles Blow in today's New York Times was asking. What would it take for those who forgive Trump everything? What would it take for them to start peeling away? You know, the Republicans hung with Nixon for a long, long time. Through Watergate, through his re-election, because that's important for them. Nixon had one problem, though. He didn't have Fox News. He didn't have a full-blown propaganda arm. And I just want to read. If you think I'm depressing, listen. And I'm trying not to be, actually. I'm trying not to be. I don't think I've been so far. Charles Blow, let me read the last part of his column to you, because I suspect he is correct, and it is the reason that we are heading into perilous times. Because we are clearly seeing that Mueller is closing in on collusion, closing in on Russian dealings with Trump and Trump's campaign, closing in on financial aspects of Trump's dealings with the Russians. All of this, you can see it. You can just sense it starting to happen. And so Trump will have Fox News in his corner till the bitter end. Something that Richard Nixon never had, and that's why this is not going to be as clean a result or an end as we saw then. Because Blow says, and here's where I will quote him, if Trump goes down, so too does Fox in some measure. So the network has a vested interest in defending Trump until the bitter end. And that could impede an otherwise natural and normal disaffection with Trump that, like we saw with Republicans finally backing away from Richard Nixon. Fox will keep that alternative universe up and in place as a shelter, as a sanctuary. Blow goes on to say, and furthermore, Trump does not strike me as a man amenable to contrition or one interested in the health and stability of the nation. Duh. I expect Trump to admit nothing, even if faced with proof positive of his own misconduct. Well, we know that's true. He lied to us from the beginning about such silly things as the size of his inaugural crowd. He told us that what we were seeing wasn't true. He told us that what the CIA had absolute evidence of didn't really sway him. He didn't get it. So, of course, Trump will admit nothing, even if Mueller offers proof. Nothing will be acknowledged. Nothing will be admitted. No apologies will be made. He will call the truth a lie. He will call a lie the truth. He would also never voluntarily leave office, as Nixon did. And here's the chilling thing. Blow says, I'm not even sure that he would willingly leave if he were impeached and the Senate moved to convict, a scenario that I agree is hard to imagine at this point. So here's how Charles Blow, admittedly somebody who has been in a state of near lethal depression since Trump's presidency, says this. I don't think any of this gets better, even as the evidence becomes clearer. I don't believe that Trump's supporters will reverse course in the same way that Nixon's did. I don't believe that any facts that Mueller presents will be considered unassailable. I don't believe Trump will go down without bringing the country down with him. In short, I don't believe we are reaching the end of a nightmare, but rather I think we are entering one. This will not get easier, but harder. The country is about to enter the crucible. This test of our republic is without a true comparison, and we do not have a clear picture of how it will resolve. But I believe damage is certain. I'm afraid I have that same dark view. So when I see people, elated about, Michael Cohen doing this or Mueller saying that or sentencing of who and this and closing in on Stone and Corsi, blah, 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 I'm thinking, oh boy, oh boy, what we are heading into. I came upon something I just wanted to pass on to you about Michael Bloomberg's influence on the midterm elections. I don't know if you saw it. And Michael Bloomberg is, he was the Republican mayor of New York City. He is now, as far as I know, a registered Democrat. And he is an excessively wealthy man. Self-made, I must say. He has a number of PACs. Well, he has two that I'm aware of. One deals mostly with gun control measures. The other is mostly having to do with climate change. He has a great deal of impact in those two areas, and any progress being made there, often you see his footprints. But in this last midterm, he or his foundations or PACs, and these PACs are almost totally self-funded. He uses his own money. His spending in these last elections topped $112 million. That includes donations to help people running in House races trying to flip Republican-held seats. That included certain Senate candidates, also included money that he gave to progressive organizations who were getting the vote out and doing other things. Records now available, and this will go up because not all the records of spending are in, but records show that Michael Bloomberg spent more than $41 million on just 24 House races. And most of that money was spent in the last few days of the election. He laid low, didn't do much of anything till right at the very end, and meanwhile, he's looking at what's flippable. He, at the last minute, went into races where the Democrat was down by 5-6 points in heavily Republican districts, in red states. One, a specific state that people were just blown away by, was Oklahoma's 5th congressional district. At the last minute, he goes in. The Democrats trailing. And he throws a really smart ad that he has produced and paid for at her opponent. He makes sure it airs during the Oklahoma football games. It aired at the quarter, it aired at the half, it aired at the end, it aired at the beginning, and it was highly effective. And that seat that nobody thought would flip was flipped. Of all the Democrats he came in for at the end, those were 24 races. 21 of them were won. And of those, 12 had been considered absolute Republican districts or toss-ups. And so on and on, he did that. I just wanted to point that out. He's thinking of running for the Democratic nomination. I do not think he's the candidate we should have. And even if he's not the candidate, this is what he's brilliant at. So I want to tip my hat to Michael Bloomberg. We have a caller maybe now if I haven't talked him off too. Hello?
Hi, it's her.
Oh, it's a her. I'm so used to having gentlemen callers that well, hi.
You know what? Bloomberg, I think he would win. He would, Republicans have always loved him. I don't know, but when his name comes up, I keep saying, you know what? As a, never Trumper, closer to moderate Democratic, points of view, I think he could win.
Well,
and if it comes down to it, I'd vote for him. If it was him or Trump, I'd vote for him.
Heck,
I mean,
sure. Yeah. But I'm just saying, he's old. And
right.
He's an old.
He probably doesn't want to do it.
No, I think he does. He's an old white New York billionaire. And, that's what we got in the White House now. Not that I'm in any way comparing him to Trump, but I really think Democrats need to get away from the coasts. I think they need to find somebody who is going to be able to peel off, who's going to seem like a regular person somehow. I really do, and Bloomberg ain't.
I rarely watch MSNBC, but I know I was watching last week sometime, and I forget which host it was that was in a very positive segment going on about, there are lots of positive and possibilities for the Democrats. And they went, I swear they did like 30 people, and they put a map up, like on the East Coast, who are the viable candidates, West Coast, Mid-Central. It was incredible, and I knew every one of the names, and the more people that they kept adding to the list, I was like, you know what, you're right. That one's good, that one's good, that one's strong. So I forget who had that segment, but it left me with this incredibly positive outlook. Like,
well,
they're right.
Yeah, here's what scares me, though, because how do we... You remember what the Republican, when they were trying to find the Republican nominee last time? Remember all those people on the stage at those initial debates? Remember?
I don't think we would do that.
Well, we will. We'll have to. We'll have to. We'll have to have a debate stage, that is like 3 miles long. I mean, I don't know how the hell are we going to ever...
well, that's where you hope the leadership, which has not been, very successful lately. Let's hope new leadership gets in there and people are far more reasonable and concerned about, winning rather than ego. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, yes, we'll see. We'll see. But, I mean, I think that in 2 years, this country will be so traumatized by this presidency that you know what we don't know. You know what we don't know is he going to be I think he'll be primaried. Trump's gonna. The Republicans might rip themselves apart a bit by somebody's going to step forward and take him on in Republican primaries.
Sure, we know they are. Flake, Corker, all of those guys are lining themselves up right now. They have been,
And and you also don't know if one of them, if Trump gets the nomination, if somebody runs as a independent. All of that will help any Democrat who's running if the Democrats don't do what they certainly are capable of, which is, divide themselves into so many squabbling factions that, as of, like Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, that you can't get together in the end. The stakes are so high. God, let us hope.
Well, they did it with the House Speaker, didn't they? I think that the news media was like drumming up a battle. Nancy Pelosi, the dreaded Nancy Pelosi, and they're going to put all these new young Dems, and there's no way are they going to vote for her. I loved it because in a way they geared it up, and Dems just went right with it, which was perfect. Right. It's like no, I mean they were talking people. She has the knowledge, she has the backing. The fact that they didn't want her is almost the reason. Yeah, go for it. There's a reason why. The Republicans hate her.
Well, yeah.
So they came together and did that, right? Peacefully, actually. Without much,
well,
controversy.
She's still, yeah, but I don't, she's just been nominated. She still hasn't won.
Right, but I think they're going to sort of like just back her. I mean, she has.
I think she needs.
I
think she has to still get more votes to actually win the speakership. I don't know. I mean, you have whatever. Democrats really are like the classic herding cats thing, and but that is.
And hopefully they're the new breed understands this, or some people have gotten smart. I mean, that's what we have to hope for that.
Okay.
Because otherwise, it's pretty grim.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, really. But Democrats do have a tendency to know how to snatch victory from the
Yes, sir.
victory from the
Hey,
closet.
you know why I was going to call, and I didn't want to go on too long with it. I think I started listening today when you were talking about, I think, President Bush.
Yeah.
And you were talking about how hate and people, we have to come together. And I think that was, weren't you talking about his funeral?
Well, I wasn't talking about the funeral. I was just talking about that the contrast between him and Trump makes Bush look like almost godlike, right? He's just an honorable, good
I know,
man.
and that really frustrates me because I think everybody has that sort of sense of, oh, he was a great man, and I'm thinking, no, he wasn't. He really wasn't. And I will say nothing bad about, I think that we have to be able to say nobody in this country is held accountable for the mistakes they make, right?
Well, my sense of H.W. Bush is that he was honorable, that he tried to do his best. He was a company man in that, he came from something that doesn't exist really much anymore, which is this, sort of rich patrician background in which you were supposed to go into public service. And if you think about his career, I mean, he not only served admirably as a soldier, but he also served in Congress, in the Senate, as the CIA, in the vice presidency, in the president. I mean, this is a guy who did his, I think, best. Let's remember a few things that he did that I credit him with. And I have to tell you, I haven't read any of the obits. I just don't have the energy.
Neither have I.
I just can't. But one thing I want to remind people about is that when Saddam Hussein decided he was going to go into, Kuwait, and take their oil fields as well, Bush went in and stopped him, pushed him back, and as soon as he pushed Saddam Hussein back into Iraq, he stopped. He did not invade.
Well, and this is exactly what I hold against him.
Why?
He had knowledge. He had his son. Excuse me. He could have advised his son.
No. He was not the president then. His son and Dick Cheney were absolute. It was more Dick Cheney.
Were all in
but you
Bush's
can't hold that against
Dick Cheney. All
That's
of those
fine.
guys.
But he stopped. He did not go. He did. I mean, Saddam Hussein needed to be pushed back at that point. He did. That first Gulf
War.
War.
Saddam Hussein did not need to be taken out at the time of his son's administration. And I could not imagine why his father to me was never an honorable man. Knowing especially what we knew now. We knew then, a lot of us knew then, that there was no need for this, right? I mean,
you're talking, but you're conflating the son
and his administration.
You're conflating the son and his son's presidency with his father's. I'm talking about his father.
Yes, I know, but you know what? When his father had the exact same job, it'd be like if he was the CEO of a company, right? And suddenly the son takes over, and it becomes this evil whatever. you'd think that the father might have the integrity to stand up and say, no, this is not what it's supposed to be about.
Well, okay. Well, I don't
And that's part of that. I used to think of his father. It was almost like, well, his father has to be in on this. His father knows all the background, right? Yeah, his father was head of the CIA. I mean, that man had access to all of the correct information, and yet never said anything. I'm sorry. I just...
All right. Okay.
That I will never give Bush the son the pass. Which now we're talking about him as being,
because
of Trump.
Donald
we're talking
Trump,
about how wonderful George
Donald
Bush was,
Trump makes every human being look godlike. I mean, we all look better because of him. I mean, there's not a president that hasn't gained stature in relationship to Donald Trump. I mean, everything being relative. Hey, I got another call, so I'm going to let you go. Thank you. Bye-bye. Hello, caller. Hello.
Hey, Lynn, it's Roger.
Hi, Roger.
Hi, it's Roger. How are you?
I'm fine.
Hey, it's a shame. I keep explaining to people that I never had a problem with Republicans. I didn't agree with them, but you knew that we were on the same team. And that's changed. And I think that's what the passing of George H.W. Bush has reminded us, the passing of John McCain. I mean, there was a lot of faults, and we beat him up on it legitimately.
Right.
But that Republican's gone, and I hope they come back. I don't want us to be a single-party country.
I don't see how they can come back. They need a new name, because this Republican Party, it's been destroyed, and they've allowed themselves to be destroyed. I mean, it's not just Donald Trump. It's Mitch McConnell. It's Ryan. It's all of them. All of them. They don't stand up to this guy at all.
And honestly, as great as they want to hold him up to be, the problem of all this started with Reagan. Mm-hmm. It really did. I mean, they became anti-government. And I've said this before. It's like, name me a better government you want to be. I mean, it doesn't exist. And I remind people, okay, you hate the government, but point to one get a globe out. Point to a country that has a better government that you want to belong to.
Well, I don't. But Roger, we don't know enough. We're Americans. We don't know enough about other countries' governments to be able to. There are smaller countries, more homogeneous populations that work better, that have better governments. But when it comes to a polyglot nation like ours, it's not an easy nation to govern, and I don't know what to say. We're a mess right now. We really are, and our government does not offer the services that other governments offer their people. And anyway, you know what? I'm out of time, Muddy. I gotta go.
Okay.
Do you mind? I know. I have to go because I have to get one more email in, and my producer's got to get the hell out of here or she turns into a pumpkin at 11, okay? I got to run.
Have a nice week.
Okay, thank you. You too. I appreciate it. Bye. Amy has another job, and she's got an early shift, so I got to get her out of here. I just want to add this from Beth, and I think these are two very interesting points she makes. She says Michael Bloomberg should be heading the DNC because his PACs did more strategically than the DNC did in this last election. I suspect that is absolutely true. Also, she says Rachel Maddow had on Senator Tester on Friday night. That's the Montana, right? Montana, who Trump went after with everything he had and couldn't dislodge him from a totally red state. Beth says he would make a great presidential candidate. He has the farmer, common man, drives a tractor background, and this last election showed he could beat Trump and he can switch Trump supporters over to the Democrats. Interesting point. Of course, Tester would make the lefties in the Democratic Party go berserk. But I agree, that's a potential good candidate. Oh, are we going to be at each other's throats? Gotta go. Amy's got to catch a bus tomorrow.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.